Pastor Dave asked me to read some scripture to you from Exodus 20, 1 to 21. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourselves an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the son of the fathers to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or your daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, nor your animals, nor the alien within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that it may live long in the land of the Lord your God has given you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his manservant or maidservant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. When the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain and smoke, they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, "Speak to us yourself and we will listen, but do not have God speak to us or we will die." Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. God has come to test you so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning." The people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. Psalm 132. O Lord, remember David and all the hardships he endured. He swore an oath to the Lord and made a vow to the Mighty One of Jacob. I will not enter my house or go to my bed. I will allow no sleep to my eyes, no slumber to my eyelids, till I find a place for the Lord, a dwelling for the Mighty One of Jacob. We heard it in Ephrath. We came upon it in the fields of Jaar. Let us go to his dwelling place. Let us worship at his footstool. Arise, O Lord, and come to your resting place, you in the ark of your might. May your priests be clothed with righteousness. May your saints sing for joy. For the sake of David your servant, do not reject your anointed one. The Lord swore an oath to David, a sure oath that he will not revoke. One of your own descendants I will place on your throne. If you keep your sons, if your sons keep my covenant and the statutes I teach them, their sons will sit on your throne forever and ever. For the Lord has chosen Zion. He has desired it for his dwelling. This is my resting place forever and ever. Here I will sit enthroned, for I have desired it. I will bless her with abundant provisions. Her poor I will satisfy with food. I will clothe her priests with salvation, and her saints will ever sing for joy. Here I will make a horn grow for David, and set up a lamp for my anointed one. I will clothe his enemies with shame, but the crown on his head will be resplendent.
I have been walking for days. My feet are so sore. This heat, I can't believe the heat. How come it's so hot here? How come we always have to walk to Jerusalem? Why can't we just worship God where we are? I live in Capernaum. Why do I have to go to Jerusalem? Isn't God in Capernaum? My feet. I need to stop for a minute. Do you know how far Capernaum is from Jerusalem? It's 27.33 kilometers. Oh, you guys probably don't know kilometers, do you? It's 25 miles. I've been walking 25 miles 3 times a year, 25 miles there, 25 miles back. Why? It was my mother. I think it's my mother's fault. My mother, she says, Asgad? Oh, that's my name, Asgad. She named me Asgad. People call me Az, though. She says, Asgad, I'm gonna name you Asgad because it means God is mighty. And she says, you're gonna be a mighty man for God. And she said to me, my mother, she said a lot of things to me. She said, Asgad, you need to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year to worship our God. Go for Passover and celebrate the remembrance. She says, never forget what God has done for you. That's what the Passover was all about, she said. God delivered our people from slavery out of Egypt into a promised land. Go and remember what God has done for you. And then she says, go for this Feast of Weeks, or the Feast of First Fruits. It's such a wonderful time because it's when the law of God was given, the 10 Commandments. And remember what God has done for you. And she says, go in the fall for Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The day when you can confess your sins to God and they're forgiven, when they're put on the mercy seat of the ark and you can walk in freedom. She says, never stop going to God. But go 3 times a year, she said. And when you go, she said, sing the songs of ascent. Well, I mean, when you're just a little tyke, what do? You listen to your mom. And I remember memorizing the Psalms of Ascent. 3 times a year, we would sing these songs as we would march to Jerusalem, 25 miles there and 25 miles back. Do you know how far 25 miles is when you walk? It takes us like almost a week. We're so slow because we're a big caravan. What they do is they put the men in front and the men in back, and all of us, when we were little children, had to walk with our moms and our grandmas. I always walked by my grandma. I called her Nanny. She was such a saint, and she knew how to sing. That's why I walked with her, because she would sing these songs. And she would sing, these beautiful songs of ascent. And that's how she says, when you sing these songs, you're going to memorize what God has done for you. Now, my mom, she says, I'm naming you Asgad after your great-great-great-great-grandfather. She says 5 times great. She says your great-great-great-grandfather came back to Jerusalem with Nehemiah. Well, I didn't know who Nehemiah was. But she said Nehemiah came back and rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem in 52 days. Jerusalem was destroyed because, she says, Jerusalem was destroyed because the people forgot to sing the songs. They forgot who God was. They forgot that God was great. They forgot to remember. And Jerusalem was destroyed and all the people were taken into captivity. But Asgad, my great-great-great-grandfather, came back. And she says, I'm naming you after him because, well, it means a mighty God. And then she said, well, I have to tell you that your great-great-great-grandfather, his great-great-grandfather was one of David's mighty men. So you come from a long line of mighty men. And Azgad, she'd call me Azzy sometimes. She says, Az, if you remember these songs, you'll remember what God has done for you. You'll never forget what God has done. She says, remember and obey. In fact, she had this little saying, trust and obey, as there's no other way. Trust and obey, she said. There's really no other way. She told me the stories about when did I tell you about my great-great-great-great-grandfather, Azgad? I complain about walking 25 miles. When they were in captivity in Babylon, do you know they had to walk 1,700 miles? 1,700 miles walking. They couldn't walk a straight line from Babylon to Jerusalem. They had to go up and around because, well, the desert was way too hot, and the terror of the enemies and it just was not safe. So they walked 1,700 miles to establish Jerusalem again. My nanny, when I was walking with her, she says, never forget what your ancestors have done for you. I wonder, do you guys forget what your ancestors have done for you? Do you forget that God has helped your ancestors build a faith so that you could be here today? She says that's really what the Psalms of Ascent are. She says the Psalms of Ascent are about remembering. I remember, wow, I think the first time I remember walking those 25 miles was when I was a 5-year-old. Now, I'm sure she took me before 5, but I don't remember much before 5. And I've been walking this road for almost 65 years. Well, 70 total. I probably didn't walk too much when I was 5. My mother probably had to carry me. Can you imagine my mom or someone else carrying me for 25 miles, singing the Psalms of Ascent? She says the songs, she was, now, I don't know if she could sing real well, but she sang them. And she said, the songs are for you to remember. Remember what God has done for you. I remember. I mean, I that's how I memorized. I memorized by singing. There's some of the Psalms of Ascent that I just will never forget, like Psalm 121 that says, I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. When we were walking to Jerusalem, we would start we would come around. Listen, we would never walk through Samaria. Samaria, well, I mean, we were pure-blooded Jewish people, and, well, Samaria wasn't. And the people in Samaria weren't very nice. So we had to go up and down and around and come down by the Dead Sea. And it was about 2,600 feet up into Jerusalem from the Dead Sea, straight up on these winding roads. And I remember Psalm 121. As we got there, you could see the mountain. You could see Mount Zion. And I lift my eyes to the mountain. But as we were walking, you could see in the clefts of the rock all the carved images, the wooden carved images and the stone carved images of pagan gods. And my mom would say, lift your eyes. Don't look at those pagan gods. They'll never satisfy you. I lift my eyes to the mountains. She says, lift your eyes even higher. Lift your eyes to the one who made the mountains, the maker of heaven and earth. I think Psalm 125, though, that was my favorite. It says, when we were walking down through by the Dead Sea, the mountains were surrounding us, and it says, as the mountains surround Jerusalem, so my love surrounds you. Wow. As the mountain surrounds Jerusalem, so my love surrounds. Those who trust in the Lord, my nanny, she would hold my hand and she would say, trust in the Lord. She said, trust in the Lord, no matter what. Trust in the Lord no matter how hard it gets. Trust in the Lord when things are heavy. Trust in the Lord when it's dark. She says, those who trust in the Lord, wow, will never be shaken. There were times when I wanted to sit down and cry. My feet were raw. It was a hard walk, walking those 25 miles there, uphill most of the way, and 25 miles back to Capernaum 3 times a year. That's a lot of walking. There were other verses that she taught me in those Psalms. I wrote some of them down right here in my scroll. I carry my little scroll with me, and I wrote these verses down, and it says in Psalm 127, it says, unless the Lord builds the house, the laborers work in vain. I remember my mom saying, all you have is your name. Labor so that your work honors God. She says, unless the Lord builds what you're working on, whatever you're working on isn't going to hold up. Wow. My mom, she was a teacher. She was also a disciplinarian. She kept me in line. There were times when I would wander off the path, and she'd grab my hand and she'd say, Azzy, don't stray off the path. Trust God. Trust God. I don't know, I'm on my way to Jerusalem. I hope you can sing some of these songs with me. There was another one in Psalm 128. It says, blessed are all who fear the Lord, who walk in his ways. My Grammy, she would say, Azzy, you want to be blessed? Walk with the Lord. Psalm 129 said, they have greatly oppressed me from my youth. Let Israel say, they have greatly oppressed me from my youth, but they have not gained the victory over me. Wow. She'd tell me the history of my people, how they had struggled, and yet God had delivered them over and over and over again. She said, remember the promises of God. Never forget that God is with you, that God will never forsake you. Azzy, trust in the Lord, and you'll never be shaken. Azzy, lift your eyes to the mountains. Know that your help doesn't come from them, but your help comes from the maker of the mountains. Psalm 130 says, if you, O Lord, kept a record of sins, O Lord, who could stand? But with you there is forgiveness. Therefore you're feared. I think my nanny was the one who taught me about forgiveness. Now, there was a lot of times when I strayed off the path. I fell from grace, as she would say. But she would say, with God, Azzy, there's forgiveness. Fear God and not man. My mom was a teacher. She taught me the Psalms of Ascent, but the first thing she taught me how to do was to pray. She taught me how to pray. She taught me the Shama. Shama, do you know the Shama? The Shama is our prayer. We pray it 3 times a day. Shama Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu. Adonai Hagaka Va'et. Modeka Moshika. Uvko Modeka. Uvko Moshika. It's here. I'll translate it. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength." That was, she said, if you don't remember anything, remember the Shama. She says, Azzy, the Shama, in our language, the Shama means hear or obey. She says, when you hear something, you obey it. She would say, Azzy, when I tell you to pick up your clothes, I mean pick up your clothes now. Hear and obey. She says, hear, Azzy, the Lord your God is one. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. That was the first thing she taught me before she taught me the Psalms of Ascent. She taught me to pray. She taught me to sing, but she also taught me the law. Do you know the law? The law? It was given to us by Moses. There's only 10 of them. She says, if you could keep these 10, just keep these 10, you're going to be walking with God. Thou shalt have no other God before me. She says, don't put anything in your life before God. She said, Azzy, when you're making a decision, ask yourself, would God want me to do this? Have no other God before me, she said. And thou shalt not make for yourself any graven images. Well, she said, do you see those pagan gods in the clefts of the rock? They're pagan images. Those images of stone, those images of rock will never save you. They'll never deliver you out of slavery. Those pagan images. Don't make for yourself a pagan image, she said. Thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. The Lord's name was so holy that our people wouldn't even say his name. We wouldn't say Elohim, Yahweh. We would just say Adonai. Adonai, Lord. And then, I think it was, she said, Azzy, keep the Sabbath. Keep it holy. She says, God worked for 6 days and rested. Why can't you? Why can't you have a Sabbath? Are you more important than God? Can you trust God to provide for you on a Sabbath? She taught me a lot about resting in the presence of God. And then she would kind of hammer this one home. That's the fifth law. Honor your father and mother. When I was acting out, oh my gosh, she'd say, Azzy, you're supposed to honor me. And then she would say, do you know that the 5th law is the only one with a promise? It says, honor your father and mother and things will go well with you. Azzy, you want things to go well with you? Honor your father and mother and things will go well with you. Well, then those do not steal, do not kill, do not commit adultery, don't bear false witness, and don't covet. Those were the things she taught me. 10 things. She says, Azzy, when you walk with God, keep his laws. And especially on a day like today, she said, honor your father and mother, and things will go well with you. Well, she taught me the Shama. She taught me the Torah, the 10 Commandments. And then when we got to Psalm 132, when we're going up to Jerusalem, she said, Psalm 132 is about remembering. Remembering what God has done for you. Some of the other Psalms, like Psalm 121 and 125 and 130, they're beautiful songs, but Psalm 132, it's just, one, it's long. I could never memorize Psalm 132. It was just way too long. But it was about remembering what God has done for us in the past. She says, Psalm 132 is about remembering and obeying. And then she would tell me the story about the ark and David, because that's really what Psalm 132 is about. Do you know that there was an ark of the covenant? The ark of the covenant was I think it was about 1 foot long and about 16 inches high, and it was covered in gold. And that ark of the covenant, she says, Moses took the 10 commandments and put it in the ark of the covenant. And Moses took the rod that he used to deliver the people in Egypt that had a bud growing out of it, and he put that in the ark of the covenant. And then he put some of the manna in the ark of the covenant. Do you know that they carried the ark of the covenant around for 40 years in the wilderness? And every time they would set up a tent, they put it in the most holy place. And on the ark are these two angels, and on top of the ark they called it the mercy seat. And once a year they would sprinkle the blood of the lamb on the mercy seat for the forgiveness of sins. That ark of the covenant protected them and brought them out of slavery, because it was, see, she says, remember that the ark of the covenant is all about God's presence. And that's what Psalm 132 was about. Remembering that they lost God's presence. You see, when the Ark of the Covenant, they come for 40 years wandering in the wilderness, setting up and moving the Ark. When the time came for them to come into Jerusalem, into the promised land by Jericho, God told Joshua to get the priest and step into the Jordan River with the Ark of the Covenant. Do you know what happened? The water split. As soon as the Ark of the Covenant went into the Jordan River, the water split and they went into the Promised Land. Well, the first place that, I think the first place that the Ark of the Covenant was settled was around Jericho, but I think it was Bethel. And then it was moved to another place. And then during Saul's reign, he moved it again to a place called Mizpah. And then the enemies captured the Ark of the Covenant. The Philistines took it for years. And they lost the presence of God. And my mom said, have you lost the presence of God? Has he? Have you lost what God has done for you? How he's carried you and brought you out of slavery and reminded you of his laws, his commandments, and his prayers, especially when I failed. It was David, King David. He's mentioned so many times in Psalm 132. It was King David who wanted to bring the ark out of the fields of Jaar. Well, you probably don't know where Jaar is, but it's Kiriath. And you know, it means in the thicket, in the woods. The Ark of the Covenant was kind of buried out in the wilderness because the people had lost the Ark. They had lost the presence of God. And David made a commitment to God. He said, no sleep will come to my eyes till I build a place for the ark. No slumber to my eyelids. Why? Because it said when we have the Ark of the Covenant, that God's presence will dwell with us there forever and ever and ever. And that's what my mom taught me, was don't ever lose the presence of God. Stand in that presence of God. She said, remember Psalm 132, because in Psalm 132, the people forgot what God had done for them. I can tell you when we were walking up to Jerusalem and walking back every year, singing Psalm 132 was really, really hard. One, it was really long, and I didn't understand that it was about remembering and obeying. My nanny, she said, Azzy, all you have is your name and your faith. She says, walk with God. She said, take that faith, Azzy, and make a leap of faith. She says, this year in Israel, it's the year of the open door. Did you know that this year's the year of the open door? That means God's going to open doors that no man can close and close doors that no man can open. And my nanny would say, Izzy, in the year of the open door, God's going to do wonderful, miraculous things. Take a leap of faith and walk through the open door. And remember that God is faithful, that God will never leave you, that God's presence will be with you forever and ever. I've got to head to Jerusalem. I hope I see you there. But more importantly, I hope that you remember. I hope you remember the Psalms of Ascent. I pray that you'll take one line or two lines out of any of those Psalms and put them to your heart. That you'll put them in your heart and that you'll put them into your mind. That you'll lift your eyes up to the mountains. That you'll trust in the Lord no matter what. That you'll remember that God's presence is with you forever and ever. That you'll remember that God hasn't forgotten you, no matter what you're going through. He's going to be with you. That's what I was taught. Love the Lord your God